Avernus, Chapter 4, Equal Hostilities. As Davies and Mills start walking into the dark opening of the tunnel, they shine their flashlights outward and move forwards, hearing dripping and echoes.
The sooner we get out of here, the better. I can hear something, but I don't know. You know, Mills?
Davies says to Mills, but Mills remains silent. They continue walking. The tunnel just seems to go on forever. There doesn't seem to be a light at the end of this tunnel. It's just complete darkness. Davies can only see what he's illuminating with his flashlight. They continue moving, while the tunnel seems to get tighter with every moment. They continue to walk into this cold, dark, and eerie environment. 10 minutes pass as they come across an area that has a few interfaces in it. Davies looks at the illuminated interface and places his hand on it. It illuminates a screen next to the interface showing what seems to be some very advanced pieces of documents. Davies starts looking through them. One of them says, "Containment Protocols." Mills whispers,
"Containment of what?" we wonder.
Davies continues looking through to see what or who these protocols are for. He comes across a file called Flood.
Maybe there was a flood in a facility or area, and these protocols are for preventing the spread of the flooding.
Davies contemplates to himself. Back at Alpha Base, the ODSTs finally arrive and they demand to speak to Lieutenant Danko. Danko was 5 foot 5 inch tall, had short, jet black hair, and a muscular body build. Danko had strict strategies for dealing with such things. He started off as a commander himself back when he was fighting off rebels, and then when the Covenant came, he fought in the Battle of Jericho 7. He was brutish, ruthless, and lacked any sympathy for his fallen comrades. All he seemed to care about was victory, no matter the losses. He was arrogant and fearless, which had led to his downfall, as he was bumped down to lieutenant and placed on this assignment under the supervision of Commander Mills.
Sir.
A Marine says to Danko,
What is it, boy?
I've got a lot of shit to work out here.
Danko replies to the Marine. He then asks another Marine that was on the comm link.
Has there been any word from Commander Mills?
The Marine says,
Not yet, sir.
That's when the ODST budges past the Marine, blocking the entrance to the command center, and says,
That's what I came here to inform you about, Lieutenant.
Danko asks,
Well, where's the commander?
The ODST replies,
Back at the quarantine base, we encountered something new. These things looked human, but seemed like they'd been mutated into something else.
Danko replies,
Mutations. What kind of mutations? Are they infectious?
The ODST replies with some uncertainty.
I have no idea, sir. The commander is back at the research facility. We have to get back there and help with the evacuation.
Danko says,
Of course. We'll go in with half our forces. One force to stay defend the base, and one force to help evacuate the research facility.
Underneath the research facility, Alexis, Commander Mills, and the 2 researchers start heading into the depths of the basement. One of the researchers looks nervous as they proceed. They come up to a hallway with blood on the floor. They then head through a door to see a lab, or what remains of one. Glass shards on the floor and blood all over the place. Alexis asks,
What happened here? There's a lot of blood, but doesn't seem to be.
She was cut off by the nervous researcher when he says,
Keep quiet. We don't want to alert them.
Commander Mills inquires.
Them? The things upstairs?
The researcher replies.
No, these life forms are different.
Alexis asks, confused at what he says.
Life forms?
Well, only told us to use them to make the stepping stones towards a new super soldier program, like the Spartans, but cost efficient.
The researcher reveals. Commander Mills replies.
Use what? Or who?
The researcher just replies.
You really don't want to know.
Commander Mills hears enough when he grabs the researcher and slams him against the wall and says,
What happened here, man? Who or what are you talking about?
The researcher says,
If I give you the details, will you keep quiet and allow us to escape from these horrors?
Commander Mills nods, and the researcher starts recounting the events that led up to this moment. 8 hours earlier. Inside the basement, the researchers are under special orders to use a special life form to create a new super soldier, one that holds no fear, complete and absolute control over the battlefield. If they succeed, they could turn the tables in the Great War. They had some holding cells for the experiments. Instead of metal bars or doors, it had ray shields over the openings to ensure no escape.
Sir, I couldn't stop him.
The operative replies to the scientist.
Who?
The inspector bursts in and says,
What in the Sam hell is going on in here? What are those things?
The operative says,
This is a restricted area. Not even an inspector has the authority to breach this place.
The inspector replies.
Who do you think you are?
A smirk starts growing over the operative's face and says,
Restrain him.
The other operatives grab a hold of him, and they force him into a holding cell and then activate the ray shielding. The inspector shouts,
What the hell do you think you're doing?
The operative replies,
You wanted to inspect? Well, you can inspect the experiment up close and personal.
He signals the scientists, and a grate in the cell opens up. The inspector hears a noise, and out comes a squid-like creature with some appendages forming out. Like small tentacles, it latches onto the inspector. He starts freaking out, trying to grab this creature. However, it was too quick. It crawls to the back of his neck and uses the tentacle to start slicing through the skin and muscle before slowly disappearing into the wound. The inspector cries out in pain as he feels a strange sensation as if he can feel it moving around inside him. He then starts screaming in pain as he feels the bones in his arms cracking under pressure, and within the pain he can feel a tumor growing in his upper chest as the creature is reworking the DNA of the inspector. As the tumor grows, his breathing becomes shallow and slow. As it grows, he feels as if his neck is being tilted backwards. The inspector starts slowly losing consciousness. As his vision of the world turns upright, claws start forming over one of the arms, and his skin starts turning a pale green hue. Eventually, a snap could be heard as the neck finally broke and the transformation was complete. It started pounding on the shield, and the operative says,
Enjoying your new form?
and tells the scientists to let him know of any new developments. 7 hours later. The lights start flickering, as if the power had been interrupted, and a few shrieks could be heard, followed by a lot of screaming within the depths of the basement. One of the squid-like creatures in a tank starts banging against the glass as if knowing that this was the time to break free from their restraints. The operatives have freely been given these creatures hosts throughout their research. People like murderers, defectors, and people that are against only researching. So needless to say, these creatures had a lot of bodies or hosts. The creatures break out of the holding cells and start slaughtering the researchers, operatives, and scientists. One of the tanks bursts open, and a swarm of those smaller creatures starts squiddling towards a group of researchers. One of them runs to the door and locks it, while hearing the others are banging on the door and shouting to open the door. However, the researcher knew if he would be knocking on death's door along with his colleagues. Slowly, the banging on the door starts to disappear, as it was replaced by something trying to buckle and smash down the door. The last researcher runs towards the lift and goes up towards the research facility. As soon as he opens the trapdoor, the necromorphs start their assault, and he starts walking out until he is forced back into the room from where he came by Alexis, Commander Mills, and the new researcher. The researcher says,
You know the rest.
However, as he says, a voice can be heard coming from the next room. Commander Mills asks,
Can those things talk?
The researcher replies.
Not in my research. Either they just gurgle as if choking on something, or they have a high-pitched shriek.
Back in the tunnel, Davies has been going through these documents but cannot find anything to do with a flood, but only something called the flood. He presses on another interface. They then hear a noise, and they point their flashlights at its direction. It seems to be a platform like a lift coming up to meet them. Davies and Mills walk onto it, and as he presses on the interface, the lift goes down towards a slightly lit area. The lift comes to a stop, and they step off of it. A dim light seems to be coming from the bottom of a metal wall. It would seem that there is something behind the wall. Davies feels around for a way to push into the next area when his hand collides with a rock, and as he touched it, the wall slid upwards. It would seem to be a camouflaged interface. As the wall disappeared into the rock wall, the light nearly blinded Davies while Mills looked as if it had no effect on him.
Jeez, that was like a flash of lightning.
Davies says. Mills stands there and says,
What is this place?
Davies replies while scanning the room.
I'm not too sure. It looks a bit like the inside of the Forerunner buildings around Avernus, but it's just like the ship.
They had made their way into a giant hallway of some kind, with glass all over the floor, coming away from some canisters on the wall as if something had just broken out of them. The room felt eerie, like they were back in the tunnel system. Some of the lights were flickering. Some were quite dim, along with the smell of death lingering in the air.
This place feels almost as bad as the ship did.
Davies says, disgusted by the smell. Mills stands there and says, while staring at Davies,
It's making me nervous. We should head back to the ship, find another way out.
That's where a door slid open. As it did, Davies pulled out his assault rifle at the opening. When he recognized a friendly face, it was Commander Mills, Alexis, and two new faces he barely recognizes.
What the hell are you doing here? I thought I ordered you to stay at the quarantine base to await further instructions.
Commander Mills says. Davies starts to explain what he had found and about the necromorphs and about the marker. Commander Mills hears enough and says to Davies,
That's all well and good, Davies, but where is my son?
Davies looks at him, confused, when he points, as he says,
He's right there.
The group follow the direction of his finger, but they don't see Sergeant Mills anywhere nearby. Alexis then says,
There's no one there, Davies.
Davies starts shouting in anger.
He's right in front of you there. Are you people blind?
The researcher carefully and nervously says,
Let's just stay calm here and stop shouting.
Commander Mills grabs Davies and shouts,
First you decide going off looking for survivors is better than my orders. Then you and my boy decide keeping watch over the ship isn't for you, so you decide to go AWOL into the damn ship, and now you won't even tell me what the hell has happened to my son!
Commander Mills throws him against the wall as they hear his voice echoing through the facility and started hearing something else around them. They can't quite pinpoint the origin of the noise, but its presence can be felt coming closer. Davies falls against the wall, down to the floor. As he looks up, he can't locate his friend, Sergeant Mills, anywhere. He starts shouting frantically.
Mills. Mills, where did you go? Mills!
Alexis walks over to him while hearing that noise getting louder. She says to him,
Davies, Mills isn't here.
Davies replies with tears forming in his eyes.
He was with me when we found our way into the tunnel that led here, and a few terminals with something about a flood.
Alexis punches him and says,
Snap out of it. You're dealing with some PTSD shit. You didn't find Sergeant Mills.
This cripples Davies' world. As if this was the case, then he unwittingly walked away from his friend. Everything they went through together, all leading up to this moment where Davies starts to feel a sense of overwhelming guilt. When he picks himself up and starts heading back to the looming darkness when Alexis shouts,
Where are you going?
Davies replies,
To find my friend.
when the wall leading to the tunnel slams shut. Davies starts feeling around the wall to try and find a camouflage interface like the rock, when a grate smashes open, and the creatures described by the researcher falls out of a vent and onto Commander Mills and the researchers. Alexis pulls her weapon out and says to Davies,
Davies, help us! Now!
Davies completely ignores her, trying to find a way to get this wall to activate. Commander Mills and the researchers start to transform into the mutated forms of those creatures when Alexis pulls the trigger on her gun, firing all her rounds into these things, but the creatures continue transforming the host's bodies. She placed a new mag into her weapon and pulled her rifle back up to see the transformation was nearly complete. Another vent smashes open, and more of those creatures fell out swarming towards her. For her own survival, she starts firing at the swarm when her weapon gets knocked out of her hands and she feels herself being lifted into the air and thrown against the wall Davies was adjacent to. She looks up at these monsters while feeling something warm run down the side of her face. She puts her hand onto her face to find it's blood. Her blood. She then sees one of those smaller creatures coming straight at her when she lets out,
Davies?
She says in a low monotone voice with the hope fading from her. It's like Davies has completely changed into a new person in the last 5 minutes. He's no longer caring or considerate about the well-beings of others, but consumed by the grief of leaving his ally back inside the ship. It's like he was in a dream state. He wasn't even fazed by the danger, much like the necromorphic creatures that attacked the base. She then looks again at these monsters, seeing the twisted forms of her former commander and the 2 researchers as they approach Davies. One of them swings his arm and collides with Davies, knocking him a few feet away from the wall with the strength of a stampeding rhino. For some reason, the combat forms decide to leave the area, perhaps looking for more victims. The infection forms latched onto Alexis and approached Davies. He looks up, seeing one of these forms making its way towards him. He pulls his pistol out and starts firing at it while laying there, destroying one, then focusing on the next, and then the next, until the swarms of these things grabbed him and started subduing him like his fallen comrades. He could then see it was trying to burrow into his chest. He did what he could to wrestle with it, and screams in pain as it starts making its way through the lining of his muscles and going deeper and deeper into the cavity. When he started hearing a buzzing noise, he could feel a sense of helplessness with his body no longer responding to him, like something was holding him down. He then climbed back onto his feet, but it wasn't him. Something was making him do these things. And then he realized these things were the flood that was to be contained like a plague or a disease. It spreads this way, consuming anything it can and using what it consumes to its own end. The last thing he sees before his neck starts to twist and contort is Sergeant Mills covered in blood and with his chest torn wide open. As the world turns to a forever darkness, he then hears through the buzzing noise a voice saying, The main force was now coming upon the research facility when they see smoke rising from the same direction.
Seems those mutations have gotten there first. Stop the convoy and try contacting them on the comlink first.
Lieutenant Danko says to the group of Marines. 10 minutes of failing to contact them occur until Danko says,
Obviously a vain effort. The research facility is lost to us, boys. Everyone back to base.
The ODST replies,
But sir, the commander is there. We have to at least get proof of the new threat.
Danko replies to the ODST,
No worries, we are still going in. We are just sending everyone home just in case it is, as you say.
The ODST says,
But sir, we'll be slaughtered.
Danko replies,
I ain't afraid of a pile of corpses. These mutated dead corpses can try it. I've faced off a group of brutes before and I'm still here. Now let's be off. And we'll see about bringing the commander back as well.
The ODST nods and settles down. The main force goes back to the base. They arrive at the destroyed research facility. While heading out on foot, They make their way through scattered debris and pieces of flaming debris as they come across to the main entrance and head through the gaping hole. They don't see much activity. Danko signals to the ODST to stay low. He then tells him to hit record on his helmet cam. The idea is to get some footage to show the Chief Commander all this, as Danko understood they won't listen unless they drop some cold hard evidence onto his lap, and to see if they can get permission for Order 343. Once in the main hall, they see a lot of blood on the floor, some of it dripping from the vents, which was very disturbing to the ODST. However, Danko remained calm, cool, and collective, almost like as if he wasn't human, like a Spartan. They see some slasher type of necromorphs in the distance under a few blinking and flickering lights. In the flickering lights, almost looked like it was teleporting around the corridor. They decided to continue onwards to get a look at all the other parts of the facility, when they feel the ground tremor a bit. Then the group of slashers move up on their position. They hear a roar coming from behind them to see a necromorph behind them. It latches onto the ODST as Danko was confronted with another slasher. He aimed for the head, completely destroying it with his battle rifle. It paused for a moment when Danko says,
These things ain't so tough.
However, it started walking towards him and swinging his arms left and right like a defense. This put Danko on edge as he hadn't seen anything like it. He started shooting it in the chest. To see it had little effect on it. That's when he got the great idea to shoot at the limbs of this creature. He goes for the legs. As he does, it drops to the floor. However, it just keeps coming towards him. He keeps shooting it until the arms had been completely dismembered. Danko thinks to himself,
So, there is a way to stop you.
he sees a leaper type necromorph and it leaps on him, pushing him to the ground, knocking his battle rifle out of his hands, while the ODST pushed the necromorph off him and knocked it back with the aid of his shotgun. While Danko was being assaulted by the leaper, it placed its arms on top of his to prevent any escape. It started dislocating its jaws, and then it went in for the finishing blow, when something ripped the leaper off him, and something else started fighting the other necromorphs in the shadows. Danko looks up to see who had saved his ass, to see the limp head of Commander Mills facing him, looking upwards towards the ceiling, as his head dangled, almost hanging by a thread. The former commander attacked the leaper viciously, ripping it apart with such strength it let out a gurgle, and then a shriek of terror. It then turned towards Danko, coming into the light to see that it wasn't the commander anymore.